Can you remember the vibrant imagination you had as a child? It felt as though if you were given the means, whether it was a paintbrush, a violin, or a video camera, you could have crafted such powerful imagery and worlds that felt as though they slipped away into the ether as you grew older. Orson Welles' most impactful quotes from 1982 ring true to this day.
The more virgin our eyes are, the more we have to say.
What I'd like to know is, where did you get the confidence from to make a thing with such...
Ignorance. Sheer ignorance. You know, there's no confidence to equal it. It's only when you know something about a profession, I think, that you're timid. I thought you could do anything with a camera that the eye could do, or the imagination could do.
You got away with enormous technical advances, didn't you?
Simply by not knowing that they were impossible.
It's almost as if you lose creativity as you lose your innocence and realize all the things that you simply can't do, and it squashes your potential. A child was born a few years later who managed to carry his childhood imagination into adulthood, a man we all know as Neige, the French word for snow. Forming a solo musical project in the late 90s, Neige would name his project Alceste, and its inspiration would be derived from a mythical place that can only be described as a fairyland, which had colors, forms, and sounds that do not exist here. 1999 is not so long ago, but since that point, Alceste has moved the needle of a genre that was predestined to remain cold, bleak, and abrasive into a direction that could take you back in time to those early days when the world felt like nothing was impossible. And obviously he wasn't alone. In fact, some would say that this was destined to happen regardless. But we can draw Alceste as the genesis to a new movement that transformed black metal into something that almost contradicted its origin. You see, much like Ultron, black metal wasn't meant to be beautiful. Most rebellions do not waste their time with beauty. It's clear that there weren't thoughts to the future when projects like Burzum and Mayhem were created, but the future came nonetheless. And against their will, black metal became beauty where it was improbable, the ugly duckling of metal which manifested what we call blackgaze. We can all point to a time when this hit more mainstream ears, and the Pitchforks and Anthony Fantanos of the world were able to grasp it, and all roads lead to Judah. Deaf Heaven, that is, formed by George Clark and Kerry McCoy, released Roads to Judah, named after a streetcar in San Francisco, under the Death Wish label, catching the attention of NPR, Decibel, and many other traditionally hipster reviewers. This is where the narrative changes, but doesn't reach its climax until their release Sunbather, which caused such a rift by its popularity on the music board from 4chan, which at the time was an actually very influential driver of musical opinions. And for those of us in the know, In the Airplane Over the Sea and Have a Nice Life hold special places in our hearts. But for those of us who aren't, there was once a time when the music industry was heavily influenced by these Revolver magazines and NPRs, and the internet was constantly searching for something unique, and boards like these were perfect places to start cult classics.
Nobody's actually just like copying us, basically. A lot of bands seem to be inspired by a lot of things we've done.
Because you took things so far so quickly that, in a way, they're up against a cul-de-sac that they can't get out of.
It's the whole thing, if you operate within a certain framework, you're always going to be a lesser version in general.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the metaphorical music world, shoegaze was a term coined casually in reference to the vocalist from the band Moose, Russell Yates, who kept his lyric sheets down on the stage floor, and shoegaze guitarists have these massive pedal boards filled with effects, meaning everyone was just staring at their shoes most of the time, which is a terrible descriptor because it gives you no context as to the actual sound and content of the music. Shoegaze is a sweet, nostalgic, lo-fi subgenre of indie and alt-rock that utilizes a massive well of distortion created by the guitars, which are absolutely coated in effects combined with vocals that sit further back in the mix and are washed in reverb. Pitchfork very accurately described it as music for dreaming. There's so much more for your brain to focus on, but it doesn't, and you descend into a realm, an almost flow state of listening that lets you sit in limbo for a while and enjoy your stay. The only logical conclusion had already presented itself, and it occurred in such a natural way, groups with members that were equally influenced by both entities, that a collision course was imminent. Walls of sound, washed out vocals, and almost passive intensity, lyrics addressing nature, loss, sometimes tragedy. Blackgaze was formed. A perfect storm of creation with an extremely complex range of emotions.
It doesn't have, for example, one particular theme. Rather, its theme is everything, or the entirety of human experience. It's hard to see how you could possibly present this as a dramatic activity. In other words, how would you put such a thing on stage? It seems to me essentially impossible. Perhaps it's been tried, but it seems like an impossible task to me. Maybe something like film could handle Faust because of the magical, dreamlike qualities of the second part. But apart from that, it seems to me something that demands to be read and read carefully.
Alcest having lyrical references to the dreamlike world that Nej created as a child should give you a hint as to the themes that will be present. Starting at the furthest disparities between the two entities seemed the best start, and drawing closer to the meeting point as we continue. It's easy to see the diverse range that exists as it pulls from these not entirely opposite directions. More black metal influences in lyricism will focus generally on a bleakness and lean more towards a violent diction. Words like icy, swallowing, bone, blood, etc. Olhava represents this perfectly in their song Smoldering Woodland. A poetic description of agony, of the soul's desire to return to the soil, or as it's humanely referred to in the song, the earth's flesh. There is a heavy push and pull between these almost gentle words like washes, smoldering, and warmth, which are usually followed or preceded by intense, violent imagery using words like blood, bone, and flesh. This perfectly encapsulates Blackgaze, which is a harmonious blend of intensity, power, grief, but feeds off of softer and warmer elements. The constant references to nature cannot be understated. It's obvious that Romanticism has heavily driven the lyrical landscape of Blackgaze, especially in the descriptions of emotions depicted through the relationship of humanity versus the natural world.
Sunvher is a natural person. I ditched school one day, and there was a girl that was sunbathing, and I parked there for a moment, and in like the least creepy way possible, I just kind of like watched, and I was like, man, I was so envious. It looked like she didn't have a care in the world.
Yeah.
She was totally content where she was. She had taken certain steps to sort of be that way, and I thought like what have I done differently to bring myself to this point than maybe this person has?
Deaf Heaven is where we see much of the gaze and Blackgaze manifest itself, as the band is most influenced by bands like Slowdive, The Smiths, and My Bloody Valentine. When Sunbather came out in 2013, the lyrics were unlike the average metal lyrics at the time. Not that others weren't doing this sort of thing in the background, but it was forced entirely into light in a naked way. The title track speaks of crying against an ocean of light, crushing gums and breaking bones, all such intense poetry. But we also talk about the grass, the green of the trees, white fences, and a flourishing heart. Easy enough to realize why black metal fans weren't keen on this prose. An even softer example comes from a band called Rollo Tomasi from their album Time Will Die and Love Will Bury It from 2018. Rollo Tomasi is generally labeled as mathcore with post-rock. In the hearts of Blackgaze fans, however, they are entirely adjacent to the genre. You can see the difference in this song A Flood of Light, although the aspect of nature being tied to humanity never leaves, but you can see here a much more romantic element. These are much more gazy lyrics than the previous example. She speaks of embracing frequently, reference to a patchwork quilt that ties everything together, a wandering heart, falling into another's arms, emphasizing a loss of control, of personal will. All emotions seem to be tethered to an exterior source like an anchor, a light, natural forces pulling her back. This could be tragedy, this could be an abusive relationship, it could be drug addiction, but it doesn't really matter. The language is so romantic and ensnaring that you can't pull away. This is shoegaze. This is romanticism, where black metal gave its bite, shoegaze brought its beauty.
How did these once controversial rejects become beloved icons? It's funny now to think how something as sweet and docile as a Monet painting of haystacks could piss off so many people. But they did. We have seen these beautiful, serene images all of our lives, packaged and presented as safe and wholesome, even quaint. But before these became household images, these were radical, these were wild. These paintings made people uncomfortable. They made people angry.
Examining the album covers and branding for each band, you'll see the pattern of these softer, more gentle aspects being represented visually as well. The imagery only enhances the previous points. Dreamlike qualities through typically romanticized versions of these ethereal nature scenes. Look at this album Earthcult. This perfectly hazy and magical depiction out in the forest. You're not entirely sure what's there, but it evokes these unexpected emotions from you, a nostalgia for things you've never experienced. Another Russian band, Me A Dinosaur, released their self-titled album in 2016. Just try to convince someone without listening to it that this is a metal album. And yet, it fits the sound of the album perfectly. as do so many other examples, more famous ones like Melting Sun by Lantlos, of course Sunbather by Deafheaven, Try Not to Destroy Everything You Love by An Autumn for Crippled Children, I Found the Love That I Was Looking For by Wounds of Recollection, and I Want to Be There by Sadness. These aren't your usual metal album covers because this isn't your usual metal. This actually tends to draw in more people than it turns away because it's experimental in its own way. Take the album Rose Thorn Necklace by Ghostbath, released in 2025. From afar, next to other Blackgaze albums, it has the vibrant, colorful pinks and purples that naturally draw the eye. But the closer you examine, the more intense it feels. Ghostbath is named after the act of committing suicide by submerging yourself in a body of water, and their songs reflect this. Just look at the third track of this album, titled, Well, I Tried Drowning. The cover isn't even pink upon closer examination, it's a blood red. The text is classic black metal type that is barely legible, and the hands seem deformed, almost melting.
What you listening to, son?
I don't think you like it.
Well, why not? I like this new generation of music.
As the audiophiles in the audience can tell you, both the genres of origin are considered lo-fi or low-fidelity music. Black metal was originally recorded on tape machines in garages and basements, and so it was an almost necessary requirement for bands to have this gritty and somewhat amateurish sound. And this is especially true for USBM, United States black metal, with origins in bands like Judas Iscariot that loved the low-fidelity style. It also added to the mystique and edginess of the musicians. In a genre based in satanic cults, fascination with serial killers, and death, what sense would it make for it to sound clean, pristine, and perfect? It's the same reason grainy, handheld camera works so well in horror, like Blair Witch. It changes from something created by a massive studio budget to feeling more genuine, more personal, and much more terrifying. But lo-fi is also comforting. Bands like Sadness, Wolves in the Throne Room, and APRS all revel in the haze. The production isn't high fidelity, it doesn't leap out at you to grasp your attention, it sits in comfortable frequencies that are ready for you to come to them. There's a very clever softening of the harshness occurring because this music is very intense in a live setting, but taking back some of these harsh frequencies, it suddenly becomes something you could listen to for hours at a time and never develop ear fatigue. While other bands like Holy Fawn and Kardashev, who are their own types of gazy music, some would argue doomgaze and deathgaze respectively, but are included in this conversation because of their influence, have elements of higher fidelity recording and production, but instead drench all of the instruments in an extremely dense reverb. For anyone in the audience who has tried to produce or mix in any way, you know what a pain reverb can be to handle. It's an uncontrollable force for some, but genres like Blackgaze and all of its influence like post-rock and shoegaze never try to control it. Instead, it becomes another instrument to feed off of what already exists, because how could any music be huge and cavernous if it's being forced directly into your ear? The creation of space in the mix is important, and driving that vast separation only makes the music more immersive.
But they come as in small,
more often than not, small fragments. I like to think of it as in the other room, the puzzle is all together, but they keep flipping in just one piece at a time.
In the other room,
over there.
Everything beautiful requires contrast. This was a rebellion in itself that genuinely upset a ton of traditional black metal fans, to the point that Deafheaven is essentially excommunicated from the genre, in a surprise to no one. The traditional metalhead is not drawn to positive sounding chords. Whether they understand the keys or the notes themselves, it doesn't matter. What they're hearing goes against every fiber of their being, and it's very wrong and not metal in the end. The following is a demonstration of this by the YouTuber Further Down, who has done a few Deafheaven piano covers in the past. The piano allows you to hear past the distortion and heavier production elements and realize the chords themselves. The foundation of the music is what's driving your emotions. This could be controversial, but the chords are the most important element of Blackgaze. Notice how the chords are predominantly major. There's an E major key, and there's almost a cycle through some chords that a band like Coldplay would use. Not even an insult, it's just an observation. This could replace the introduction to the Scientist easily, and you would barely notice the difference. Ironically, the rhythm section won't actually quite drive the rhythm. Blast beats will be the forefront of the percussion, and that's almost a requirement. There will be moments where it turns into a double kickfest and let that ride out, and this brings us to a unique element of black metal. Despite metal being one of the more rhythmically dominant genres, especially considering subgenres like death or gent, which are rhythmic at their core, there's something unique about blast beats in Blackgaze. From a certain perspective, you could argue that they drive the music forward but don't emphasize any specific beats within a measure, so they don't add a rhythm at all, but rather complement what's already there. Riffage isn't rampant either, but rather tremolo-picked chords that all blend together, almost like violins that would disappear behind a wall of distorted haze. The high-pitched screams drift over top. Occasionally clean vocals will come through, but they will be shoegazy harmonies that dreamily envelop each other and blend perfectly. Blend is always the word here. Everything blends and is cohesive. Nothing takes center stage. No one is the star of the show. It's just a choir of perfect harmony that endlessly breathes and drives forward.
So it really seemed to me that I would never ever settle for second best in life. That if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would have absolutely nothing. Because to me, nothing always seemed more important to me than a false something or something that I didn't really want. So therefore I stayed in. I did nothing. I just wrote, and I was determined that if I couldn't have exactly what I wanted, then I would disappear into the woodwork.
While active listening is an extremely important virtue that should be utilized more, Blackgaze demands a certain passivity that isn't common in most music, especially metal. Rather than needing to focus on the musicianship, on the talent, on the skill that's being represented, or of the quality of the recording, or the lyrics that the singer has been writing for months, you get to nestle perfectly in the hammock of all of these things occurring and not occurring at the same time. A state of paralysis that is also lively and moves freely and nimbly through your imagination. Blackgaze is an extremely important subsect of metal music because of how it stands in the exact middle of the fray and ruffles some community feathers along the way perhaps, but is a combination of storm and spring, gale and breeze. Some bands sit outside of the commonality. Boston Naj is one of the more notable bands in the genre, although they don't quite do anything like anyone else here. Despite the similarities, you can hear a heaping helping of post-hardcore and screamo influence brought forth that most bands don't carry with them, so it's like its own unique flavor. White Ward brings their own flavor with a bleak, noir shade of black metal with saxophones that make you feel like a detective in a mystery novel. So Hideous brings a symphonic, tragic agony and honestly is an ever-evolving band that needs more recognition. Altar of Plagues is mostly leaning into post-metal and atmospheric death metal, as if the antithesis to bands like Heritoire who have mastered the art of hopeful, post-rock inspired ballads. Sylvain rarely has harsh vocals yet easily fits into the category. This is a diverse subgenre that is ever evolving, and this is my love letter to Blackgaze. See you all next time.